The following video is for educational purposes only, and is not intended to glorify the use of any substance, legal or illegal. Do not try anything mentioned in this video purely from the information provided. What would you think if potentially the best treatment for opioid addiction came from the psychedelic root bark of an African shrub? Roughly 500,000 deaths are attributable to drug use every year. More than 350,000 of these deaths are directly related to opiates, drugs derived from the opium poppy. It's very clear to most people that opioid addiction is a huge problem, so what's being done to address the issue? Currently, the standard treatment for opioid addiction is usually detoxification and then opioid replacement therapy. This involves substituting heroin with a drug like methadone or buprenorphine, both of which are opioids. While this treatment isn't all bad and does have its pros, it also definitely comes with some cons. Basically, someone who was once addicted to an illegal drug like heroin is given a legal opioid to replace it. The benefit of this being the patient is no longer on the wrong side of the law, however many people become very dependent on the legal alternative. Opioid replacement therapy is only effective if redosed every day for years, and sometimes even the rest of your life. This means high dropout rates and a lot of relapses. Roughly 3 in 4 people who drop out of methadone treatment go back to using opioids after a month and a half. This is even worse with buprenorphine, with 4 in 5 people using opiates a month after dropping out. Luckily, there is another way, a treatment that doesn't involve constant redosing for the rest of your life. Today we're going to talk about Ibogaine, a naturally occurring psychedelic that comes from the Iboga plant. Its potential for treatment was discovered in 1962 by 19-year-old Howard Lotsoff in Brooklyn, who was a heroin junkie at the time. He was given it by a friend who told him it was derived from a West African shrub called Iboga, and it would give him a 36-hour psychedelic experience. 30 hours into the trip, he woke up from a short nap and realized that even though he hadn't had any heroin for a day and a half, he wasn't experiencing any cravings. Not only was he not experiencing any withdrawals, his perception of heroin had also completely changed. He went from associating heroin with something that gave him comfort, to something that represented death, and in that moment he decided to choose life over death. He ended up giving Ibogaine to a bunch of his friends, 7 of which were also regular heroin users. After a single dose, 5 of the 7 friends didn't touch heroin for 6 or more months. From this point on, Howard went on to dedicate his life to Ibogaine. So what is Ibogaine? It's a psychoactive chemical that's concentrated in the root bark of the Iboga plant. It's a cousin to other well-known psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin. The root bark is considered to be a religious sacrament and is used in many ancient Bwiti rituals, a spiritual discipline practiced by the natives of Gabon, Africa. It is believed that the plant allows people to travel to the land of the dead and communicate with ancestors and spirits. Whether or not you believe in its spiritual use, it's undeniable that Ibogaine has a great medical potential. In the Western world, Ibogaine has been mostly used for treatment of addiction. In 1967, Ibogaine was put on the Schedule I list in the United States, a class of drugs that are recognized as having a high potential for abuse and no recognized therapeutic value. In the rest of the world, it is largely unregulated, meaning not illegal, but also not approved for consumption. By the year 2000, roughly 900 people had received treatment, done in underground practices due to the legality of the drug. By 2006, the number only increased to roughly 3,500 people. By 2014, Ibogaine was made a legal prescription medication in 3 countries, Brazil, New Zealand, and South Africa. By now, the number of Ibogaine treatments conducted has only grown. With all these claimed results, you may be asking yourself, is it effective, and how does it work? Until very recently, there was basically no scientific evidence to prove that Ibogaine successfully treats addiction. What we do know is that Ibogaine is a naturally occurring indole alkaloid that gets converted to an active metabolite, naribogaine. This metabolite targets the opioid, serotonin, and acetylcholine neurotransmitters in the brain. Naribogaine targets the areas of the brain affected by drug-seeking and addictive behaviors and essentially rewires these areas, allowing the brain to restructure itself to a state similar to before addiction was triggered. Although there's many first-hand experiences and success stories, without hard data to prove Ibogaine's effectiveness, it's very hard to convince the medical and scientific community of potential therapeutic benefits, and even harder to change the drug scheduling and provide a safer treatment for people who need it most. A man named Thomas Kingsley Brown recently set out to do research and gather scientific data to find out just how effective Ibogaine is for treating opioid addiction. In his study, 30 people with opioid addiction were given Ibogaine treatment and then followed up with over 12 months. Here are some of his major findings. Ibogaine appeared to be successful for opioid detoxification after the single-dose withdrawal symptoms in the subjects had basically disappeared. At the 30-day mark post-treatment, 15 of the 30 people reported having no opioid use in the last 30 days. By the 6-month mark, roughly 30% of the subjects reported they hadn't touched opioids since the initial single Ibogaine dose. In other studies, researchers have reported success rates of up to 50 to 80%. Although these numbers are definitely promising, more long-term studies with larger sample groups are required to make an accurate assessment of Ibogaine's effectiveness and potential side effects. With all this exciting evidence, why isn't Ibogaine treatment being taken more seriously? The main reason for this is the fact that Ibogaine is either illegal or unregulated in many countries. In the late 60s, many substances were made illegal in the US, like psilocybin and LSD. Ibogaine, being a cousin molecule, was thrown into the mix and scheduled with the rest of them.
In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
This legal status contributes to the next major issue: safety. In high doses, Ibogaine has shown to have some adverse effects, particularly in people with pre-existing heart conditions. In large doses, also known as flood doses, Ibogaine can cause heart arrhythmias, which in the worst-case scenario can lead to death. Between 1990 and 2008, a total of 19 deaths were reported to be associated with the ingestion of Ibogaine. When taken out of context, this number can sound alarming, but I think it's important to weigh the risks with the rewards. Compared to the 350,000 people who die from opioids, 19 people over 18 years is only a tiny fraction. It's also worth noting that none of these deaths were attributed to toxic effects of the drug itself, but rather to interactions either with prior medical conditions or other drugs. The legality of Ibogaine is partly responsible for the deaths and safety concerns associated with use. As treatment centers aren't widely available, people often have to travel to a different country to receive treatment. Many opioid users don't have a lot of money, so this results in them trying to get the treatment over and done with as quickly as possible, as it's very expensive to travel to another country. Treatment is therefore done in large single flood doses to speed up the process. This puts the patient at a higher risk of adverse effects. If Ibogaine treatment was regulated, this would also mean proper screening and testing would be possible to make sure patients are suitable for treatment, providing a safer, risk-free environment for patients. As Ibogaine is a naturally occurring compound, it can't be patented. It also has a very short duration of treatment compared to the current treatment options like methadone, which are taken every day. For these reasons, there is not a lot of financial incentive for pharmaceutical companies to get more involved with Ibogaine. Although there is a huge potential benefit for thousands of people, it's profit that really helps to get things moving. It's undeniable that Ibogaine is a promising method of treatment for many, but it's important not to think of it as a magic bullet for addiction, but rather a powerful tool used in synergy with other means of treatment.